Welcome to This Explainer. I am so glad you're here with us today because we're diving straight into something incredibly profound and, frankly, pretty sensitive. We're looking at the ultimate loss, death, and specifically how in the world children are actually able to process and cope with it. In this analysis, we're going to pull together some absolutely fascinating insights that bridge theology, philosophy, and modern child psychology. We're going to look at how the youngest, most fragile among us manage to navigate a concept that even we as adults struggle to wrap our heads around. It's really a deep dive into the sheer resilience of the human spirit, starting right from our earliest years. Section 1. The hardest question. A child's first encounter with grief. You know, at some point, almost every single child faces the heartbreaking reality of grief for the very first time. It could be losing a grandparent, a family friend, or even a beloved pet. But when that moment actually hits, it brings this crushing, heavy weight of curiosity with it. It's this jarring moment where total innocence just smashes right into the stark reality of mortality. And all of their confusion, all of that grief, basically gets distilled down into one incredibly powerful question. Where are they now? The source material we're looking at today emphasizes something absolutely crucial here. The answer we give to this one universal question, it doesn't just comfort them for an afternoon. It literally shapes how that child is going to perceive the entire world and how they learn to trust their environment for the rest of their lives. If we get the answer wrong, the world just becomes this terrifying, unpredictable void. But if we get it right, we give them a lifelong framework for resilience. Section 2. The idea of heaven, finding spiritual strength. So, to understand how to actually build that framework, our source introduces the perspective of the prominent thinker Bediüzzaman. He did a really deep dive into how children, with their super limited understanding of the world, manage to navigate the overwhelming absolute terror of death. Like, how does a kid's mind not just completely shatter when someone they love suddenly disappears? Well, think about this. Children make up nearly half of humanity. Half. We almost always treat grief like it's this predominantly adult burden. But Bediüzzaman points out that for this massive chunk of the human population, they are facing the terrifying reality of death inside these weak, delicate little bodies with brains that are still developing. For them, he argues, the concept of heaven isn't just some nice theological luxury. It's a hardcore psychological necessity. It's really the only way for these fragile young minds to find the spiritual strength they need to stand up against the terrifying, seemingly final nature of death. Take a listen to this quote. "My little sibling died, became a bird of heaven, and lives better there." It's a beautiful image, right? Bediüzzaman explains that. Without this very specific kind of comforting thought, without the imagery of a better place and some kind of peaceful continuation, the sheer volume of loss in the world would just inflict irreparable wounds on a child's heart. Kids don't have the emotional calluses that we adults have built up over the years. They desperately need this vivid, hopeful imagery to patch up that sudden, terrifying hole that just ripped open in their universe. Section 3. Annihilation versus continuity, the psychological consensus. Now, here is where it gets really interesting because this isn't just some abstract philosophical theory. Modern child psychology has arrived at the exact same conclusion. We can look at two completely different psychological frameworks here. On one hand, you have total annihilation, which is the idea that death is a complete, abrupt, absolute end, nothingness. On the other hand, you have continuity. The research highlighted in our source shows that kids who are taught to view death as a complete void, as total annihilation, they struggle so much more with their grief. I mean, the sudden abruptness of nothingness, it's just way too heavy for a developing brain to process. It essentially breeds deep anxiety and fear. But those children who are given a framework of continuity, they navigate the grieving process with so much more stability. So the absolutely crucial takeaway here is this. Continuity makes the world feel safe again. By understanding that their loved one hasn't just vanished into some terrifying black hole, this psychological idea of continuity acts as an emotional safety net. It basically tells the child, hey, things change, sure, but the universe isn't just randomly erasing people. And that helps the child maintain their baseline trust that their environment and ultimately their own life is still secure. Section 4. Continuity in the Quran, the scriptural foundation. Having looked at the philosophy and the psychology, it's fascinating to see how ancient scriptures have provided this exact framework of life after death for centuries. Just consider this definitive stance from the Quran, chapter 3, verse 169. "And never think of those who have been killed in the cause of Allah as dead. Rather, they are alive with their Lord, receiving provision." This is a complete, absolute rejection of that total annihilation concept we were just talking about. The text explicitly reframes death. It's not an end, it's a transition to a continuous, provided-for existence. It really is the ultimate expression of the continuity that gives so much comfort and structure to a grieving mind.
Section 5. What was your story? Connecting to your experience.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We've looked at how philosophy, modern psychology, and scripture all converge on this one vital, absolute necessity for coping with loss. But look, these concepts aren't just academic theories or lines in an old book. They are the lived realities of our very own childhoods. Every single one of us watching this was once that little kid trying to make sense of the hardest question. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to turn it over to you. Think back for a second. When you faced loss as a child, who comforted you? And exactly how did they do it? Did they offer you a framework of continuity, or were you left trying to face the terrifying idea of total annihilation all on your own? Did the comfort you received actually work to make your world feel safe again, or did it fail? It's a pretty profound thing to reflect on, especially when you realize how those early moments of grief and the answers we were given built the very foundation of how we view the entire world today. Thank you so much for exploring this with me. Take a little time to think about your own story, and I will catch you in the next analysis.